The strangest thing about Silo 18 right now is that the algorithm keeps getting chances to destroy it. And yet, Silo 18 is still standing. That sounds almost impossible after everything we've seen. Juliet has broken rules that were supposed to be absolute. Bernard has turned against the system he spent years protecting. Lukas and Patrick Kennedy were apparently neutralized outside the silo, only for both of them to reach Silo 17 alive. And now Silo 17 has given Silo 18 something that could potentially stop the safeguard itself. That raises a much bigger question. What if the algorithm actually needs Silo 18 to survive? Episode 8 makes this possibility a lot more interesting because the show finally gave us the original purpose of the silos. Humanity built these underground communities because of an extinction-level threat involving advanced nanotechnology. The silos were designed as a way for humanity to survive long enough for the outside world to become safe again. That changes how we should look at the algorithm. For most of the series, we've treated it as the machine behind the control system. It watches, it predicts, it manipulates. It decides when people become dangerous enough to be eliminated. But if the original mission was preservation of humanity, then control may only be one part of what the algorithm is trying to accomplish. And Silo 18 may be a very unusual case. Episode 8 gives us our first major clue through Lukas and Kennedy. The algorithm believed the two men had been neutralized after they left Silo 18. That should have ended their mission. Instead, they survived and reached Silo 17. Lukas was wounded, but Kennedy managed to get him inside, and the two eventually helped uncover the secret behind Silo 17's safeguard pipe. The discovery is enormous. Jimmy's mother had sealed the pipe from inside and sacrificed herself to protect the people in Silo 17. Kennedy was able to study what she had done and communicate the information back to Silo 18. Suddenly, Juliet's people had a real method for stopping their own safeguard. And this is where the algorithm's behavior gets strange, because the system had already identified Lukas and Kennedy as a problem, yet both survived. There are several possible explanations. Maybe the attack was simply imperfect. Maybe the algorithm's information was incomplete. Maybe the system deliberately allowed them to continue. That last possibility is the one I find most interesting, because Kennedy and Lukas were carrying information Silo 18 desperately needed. Without them, Juliet might never have learned that the safeguard could be physically capped. And that means their survival may have been useful to the system, even if the people themselves were considered dangerous. There is another clue. Camille is being directed by the algorithm to figure out exactly why Lukas and Kennedy were sent towards Silo 17. That matters because the system isn't simply reacting to a rebellion anymore. It is trying to understand the purpose behind Juliet's decisions. Juliet has become unpredictable. That has been true for a long time. She survived cleaning. She returned to Silo 18 after everyone believed she was gone. She discovered that the outside world was not what she had been told. She connected with Silo 17. She learned how the safeguard worked, and now she's trying to use that information against the system itself. Yet Juliet is still alive. The algorithm has had opportunities to remove her. Instead, the conflict keeps pushing her toward information. That's why I think we may have been asking the wrong question about the algorithm. We've been asking, how does it control the silos? Maybe the more important question is, what outcome is it trying to produce? Because those are very different things. If its only purpose were obedience, Silo 18 would already be finished. Juliet's existence alone is a massive problem. She's already demonstrated that the system's rules can be broken. She knows people in another silo exist. She knows the outside environment is being manipulated. She knows the safeguard is a physical system that can potentially be stopped. Every one of those discoveries should make her more dangerous. Yet every new discovery also brings Silo 18 closer to understanding the world it lives in. That could be accidental, or it could be exactly what the algorithm needs. The Before Time storyline gives us another reason to consider this. The silos were created because humanity faced a threat that couldn't simply be defeated. The goal was survival. That means the system was designed around an extremely long-term calculation. Individual lives could be sacrificed. Entire populations could potentially be sacrificed. A silo could even be destroyed if its survival threatened the larger population, but the objective would still be humanity's survival. That creates a disturbing possibility. The algorithm may be willing to let Silo 18 reach the edge of destruction because it is testing whether this particular population can survive without destroying the larger system, and Juliet may be the reason it keeps testing them. Think about what makes Silo 18 different. Juliet has crossed boundaries other people accepted without question. Bernard eventually started questioning his own role. Shirley and Walker have become willing to challenge Judicial. Even Camille has begun to occupy an uncomfortable middle ground because she can see what following the algorithm might actually cost. Silo 18 keeps producing people who question the rules. Maybe that is exactly what the system is measuring. Because there is one thing the algorithm cannot simply manufacture: choice. You can force people to obey, you can erase memories, you can restrict information, you can control movement. But eventually you need to know whether human beings can make good decisions when the rules disappear. And Juliet is probably the best example of that test the silos have ever produced. She doesn't behave predictably. That's dangerous for a control system. It could also be valuable for a survival system. Maybe the algorithm doesn't need a population that obeys perfectly. Maybe it needs a population capable of adapting when the original rules stop working. And that would explain why Silo 18 keeps finding itself at the center of these discoveries. Silo 17 already demonstrated one possible path. The people there survived the safeguard because someone made a decision the system could not prevent. Jimmy's mother understood what was happening and physically stopped the poison. Now Silo 18 knows how. That creates a pattern. One silo discovers something, another silo learns from it. And suddenly the silos aren't isolated experiments anymore. They're communicating, they're learning, they're adapting. That is probably the single most dangerous development the algorithm has faced. Because if Silo 18 is an exception, the reason may have less to do with Juliet herself and more to do with what happens when one silo learns how to communicate with another. The entire silo system depends on separation. People inside one silo are supposed to believe they are alone. They aren't supposed to know the full structure. They aren't supposed to understand how Silo 1 connects to the others. They certainly aren't supposed to compare survival strategies. Episode 8 starts breaking that isolation. Kennedy and Lukas reach Silo 17. Juliet communicates with Jimmy. Information about the safeguard moves between silos. Bernard begins mapping the larger structure. And now Silo 18 has evidence that a population can survive an attempted safeguard activation. That is much bigger than a rebellion. A rebellion can be crushed. Knowledge is harder to remove. And this may be where Juliet becomes especially important. She isn't simply someone who wants to escape. She keeps trying to understand the mechanism. That's a major difference. Juliet approaches every mystery like an engineer. If a system exists, she wants to know how it works. If a door is locked, she wants to know what controls the lock. If the safeguard exists, she wants to know where the pipe is and whether it can be capped. The algorithm has spent generations controlling people through uncertainty. Juliet keeps turning uncertainty into information. That makes her incredibly dangerous. But it also makes her useful. If the original purpose of the algorithm is to preserve humanity, then someone like Juliet may be exactly the kind of person the system eventually needs. A perfect society of obedient people might survive as long as the conditions remain stable. A changing world requires people who can solve problems the designers never anticipated. And Juliet is basically built for that. She has already survived situations the silo system considered impossible. She crossed between silos. She returned after cleaning. She survived outside. She found Silo 17. She helped restore communication. And now she is trying to stop the safeguard. The system's attempts to contain her have repeatedly created new information that makes her more capable. That could be the central irony of the entire story. Every time the algorithm tries to control Juliet, it teaches her something, and every new piece of information makes her harder to control. There is another possibility, though, and this one is darker. Maybe the algorithm doesn't want Silo 18 to survive. Maybe it wants Silo 18 to reach a specific point before it is destroyed. That distinction matters. If the system is running a long-term experiment, then survival itself might not be the goal. The goal could be discovering what happens when a silo population learns the truth. Does it cooperate? Does it panic? Does it destroy itself? Does it find a way to survive? Does one person emerge who can connect separate populations? Juliet has already demonstrated that last possibility, and that's why I keep coming back to the idea that Silo 18 could be an exception. The show has spent years telling us that the silo system is rigid, but the characters keep proving that it isn't. There are hidden passages. There are secret elevators. There are unauthorized communications. There are people who remember things they shouldn't remember. There are survivors who should have been dead. And there are methods for stopping the safeguard that the people running the silos apparently don't want widely known. The system has cracks everywhere. Silo 18 is simply the silo where those cracks have started connecting. That could be why the algorithm is watching so closely. Camille's role becomes especially interesting here. She isn't just enforcing orders. She's being asked to determine what Juliet is planning. Robert, meanwhile, has begun questioning the system. Bernard has already crossed that line. These characters are becoming aware that the algorithm may have a larger reason for everything it does. Even Bernard, who spent so much of his life believing the rules had a moral justification, now wants the safeguard disabled before anyone accepts Silo 1's explanation. That is a major shift, and it gives us a possible path toward the season's bigger reveal. What happens if Juliet successfully caps Silo 18's safeguard? The immediate answer seems obvious. Silo 18 survives, but the consequences could be much bigger. Because once a silo proves that the safeguard can be stopped, the balance of power changes. Silo 1 can no longer rely on the threat of instant extermination. The people in Silo 18 gain leverage, and if that information reaches other silos, the entire system starts changing. That's where Silo 17 becomes so important. It isn't just another surviving population, it's proof. Proof that the safeguard can be resisted. Proof that people can survive without following the system's instructions. Proof that information can cross the boundaries between silos. And potentially, proof that the system itself has limits. Which brings us back to the original question. Why does the algorithm care about Silo 18? My theory is that Silo 18 may be the system's most important experiment. Juliet is the unpredictable variable. Lukas and Kennedy are the unexpected survivors. Silo 17 is the source of information the system apparently wanted contained. And the safeguard is the final test of whether Silo 18 can survive after the rules are broken. Maybe the algorithm is protecting Silo 18. Maybe it's testing Silo 18. Maybe it is preparing Silo 18 for something the people inside haven't discovered yet. We don't have enough evidence to say which one is true. But Episode 8 gives us enough evidence to stop assuming that the algorithm's goal is simply destruction or control. Its original mission was connected to humanity's survival. That matters. Because if humanity is the thing being protected, individual silos may be expendable. But a silo that demonstrates a new way for humanity to survive could become extremely valuable. And Juliet may have accidentally become the most valuable person in that experiment. She has already shown that the system can be questioned. Now she may show that it can be defeated. If she succeeds in stopping the safeguard, Silo 18 could become the first silo to break one of the system's most important rules and live to tell the story. And if that knowledge spreads, the algorithm faces a problem it may never have been designed to solve. Human beings who know the truth, communicate with each other, and refuse to accept the system's decisions. That could be the real reason Silo 18 matters. The silo may not be important because it is supposed to be destroyed. It may be important because it is the place where humanity finally learns how to survive without permission.